on the whole, everyone perceives the coronation as being a great success. There was no major drama, despite the fact that Prince Harry did show up. There were no major controversies. As with any huge event like this, especially one of such a historic nature, there's always going to be things going on in the background. So something that got a lot more coverage in the UK than it did here were the anti-monarchy protests that were going on as the coronation was taking place. Now, that's obviously something that brings a little bit of a shadow over the whole day's proceedings, over the whole weekend's proceedings. But on the whole, I think the reaction has been very positive. I think people were very positive towards Charles specifically, and the royal family as a whole came across incredibly well as a result of this event.
Let's talk about Harry specifically. Tell us how quick his trip was, when he arrived, when he left, and did he make it home for Archie's birthday?
His trip was incredibly quick. We are talking less than 29 hours in the UK. It really was a fly-in, fly-out situation. Interestingly, he flew commercial, so he's maybe starting to take on board all of that criticism about his decision to fly in private jets. He flew on American Airlines over to the UK, flew on British Airways back from the UK. He landed in LA at about 6:30 p.m. So Archie may not have been prepared to party through the night. Obviously, he's only 4 years old. But Harry did make it back in time to spend a good period with his son on his birthday weekend, which we know was incredibly important to the Duke of Sussex.
And when Harry was in town, who did he talk to?
Well, publicly, Harry was seen chatting with Beatrice, Eugenie, their husbands. He also had a bit of a joke with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. But on the whole, we really didn't see Harry interacting a huge amount with his immediate family. There were no public interactions with William and Kate, nothing with Charles. I mean, Harry pretty much arrived for the ceremony, went into the Abbey with Eugenie and Beatrice, and then left straight after. There wasn't any time for him to hang out with his family. Now, one thing that we know Charles was a bit disappointed by was Harry's decision to skip the private luncheon that took place after that wonderful Buckingham Palace balcony moment. We do know that Harry was extended an invitation, that he was asked to stay and attend, but he chose to go back to LA so that he could be there with his family for Archie's birthday. And we know that the other members of the royal family were a bit let down by that, although a few royal aides may have been breathing a big sigh of relief because it meant that the kind of, possibility of more controversy had been taken away.
Do you think it was hard for him to avoid talking to William, or were there like two ships passing in the night?
Given how busy the day was, there really wasn't a huge amount of opportunity for any awkward interaction. As we saw, Harry was seated in the third row behind Anne's enormous feathered hat, and William and Kate were right up there at the front, in on all the action. William had a wonderful moment during the coronation where he pledged his loyalty to his father. I think that must have been quite hard for Harry to watch, knowing that that is a role that he too was supposed to have taken on. But on the whole, there weren't any private gatherings before that Buckingham Palace luncheon that Harry chose to skip. So there wasn't really an opportunity for anyone to have a private conversation because all efforts, at least as far as Kate, William, the rest of the royal family were concerned, were focused entirely on ensuring that the coronation went off without a hitch. So during that luncheon that I spoke of at Buckingham Palace, it was a very private, intimate event, an opportunity for Charles and Camilla to celebrate and toast the day's proceedings with their nearest and dearest. The guest list was restricted to friends, very tight-knit friends, and family. Harry was indeed supposed to be there. He chose not to attend, but King Charles still found a way to pay tribute to his missing son. He did a toast in which he honored his grandchildren, including George, Charlotte, and Louis, who obviously were all at the coronation, but he also toasted to his grandchildren who were not there, and he wished Archie a very happy birthday, interestingly adding the line, "wherever he may be," which suggests that Charles didn't even know how Meghan and Harry were planning to celebrate Archie's birthday this weekend, which just gives you another indication of how big that rift between them has become.
So now one of the highlights was Prince Louis. Can you talk about how he sold the show?
Prince Louis continues to steal the show at every single official event he takes part in. Now, we know that Louis was not given a specific role in the coronation like his older brother George, simply because he is too young to be expected to take on that kind of responsibility. But he still found a way to get the cameras over to him by yawning, pulling faces during the ceremony. He had a really wonderful reaction with his sister Charlotte, where she was kind of showing him what to do, what to sing. He was having none of it. He sat back yawning with his mouth wide open. On the way to Buckingham Palace after the coronation, he was seen in the back of the carriage pulling all manner of faces. There were more yawns, there were smiles and waves, there were funny faces, there were insane expressions. He really is just showing that even as a prince, he is still a wonderfully rambunctious little boy who is being taught by his parents that yes, he needs to behave, but he doesn't need to not have a personality. William and Kate have always valued their children's individual personalities above any royal duties. And I think that Louis's behavior is a really wonderful example of how well they've managed that. Obviously, once he got up onto the Buckingham Palace balcony, I think we were all disappointed not to have a repeat of the Jubilee when he was seen putting his hands over his ears because of the fly past. But once again, he was making his sister Charlotte laugh with his antics. He was at one point playing fake piano on the balcony, which I thought was quite funny. All in all, he just proved himself to be a very energetic young man, and I think everyone is desperate to see him in another setting when we might get a few of these funny, cheeky moments. So Princess Anne is finally getting her moment in the sun, which I could not be happier about. Anne is one of, if not the, hardest working royal. She attends hundreds of events a year. She has always been a wonderful pillar of support to her brother Charles, and that was rewarded and honored at the coronation. Now, she went viral over the weekend for a number of moments. First and foremost, her outfit. Now, she, like many other attendees, was wearing traditional military garb, but I think a lot of people, particularly on this side of the Atlantic, were pretty impressed by the whole get-up. The cape, the hat, the huge feather coming out of her hat. And one interesting thing about the feather was that none other than Prince Harry happened to be positioned directly behind it in the Abbey. So it was almost as though it had been staged in order to hide Harry's face from everyone across the world, so no one could see what expressions he was making, whether he was singing as the king went past. It was almost too good to be true. It may well have been written in a script out of a sitcom. Then once the coronation was over, Princess Anne accompanied her brother back to Buckingham Palace on horseback. Now, Anne has been given the role of golden stick in waiting, which is probably going to sound very bizarre to most people. It sounds bizarre even to me. But effectively what that means is that Princess Anne was given the responsibility of guarding her brother as he made that journey. She was effectively a bodyguard on horseback, which is about as much pomp and ceremony as you can expect from any member of the royal family. Obviously, Charles has his own security. No one is expecting Anne to whip out a sword at a moment's notice if someone was to threaten Charles. But it is an incredibly honored position, and it's one that just shows you how important Anne is in Charles's life. Now, the image of her riding on horseback behind her brother's carriage, wearing that incredible outfit, unsurprisingly, everyone on Twitter went wild for it. They were calling her a legend, a warrior, several other words I can't mention on television. But all in all, she did an incredible job. And believe it or not, come Sunday, she was back at it, out attending more events. She's attending more events today. She really is non-stop, always willing to give everything to the royal family. And it's wonderful to see that she really did get that moment in the spotlight as a result.
Can you break down Kate's look for us? She had a significant headpiece, and she was twinning with Charlotte.
So Kate turned to none other than Alexander McQueen's head designer, Sarah Burton, to create an incredible gown for the coronation. Those of you who are big royal fans will remember that Sarah was the person who designed Kate's wedding dress when she tied the knot with Prince William way back in 2011. Now, Kate's dress was absolutely beautiful, and it actually looked a little bit bridal. It was white, it was very structured, it complemented her figure absolutely perfectly. And then on top of that, she wore a stunning embroidered headpiece. Some people have referred to it as a non-tiara tiara. We know that Charles wanted to take steps to reduce the show of opulence and wealth at the coronation. He's really trying to hammer home the idea that the royal family is about service and not about spending. And Kate's headpiece was the perfect example of that. It was beautiful, it was regal, it looked very much like a tiara, but it wasn't covered in opulent jewels, it wasn't made out of solid gold, but it really did hit the nail on the head as far as Kate putting across that image of a princess, of a queen in waiting. And to make matters all the more special, her daughter Charlotte was wearing a very similar ensemble, also created by Alexander McQueen, and a miniature version of Kate's headpiece, which looked absolutely beautiful on the young royal. And it really was a special moment seeing Kate and her mini-me Charlotte walking into the Abbey looking every inch like the royal family we all know and that we all love.
Next is the coronation concert. What were the highlights of that?
Well, one of the highlights for me was actually a really wonderful interaction that took place between Camilla and Charlotte. Now, as Camilla and Charles made their way to their seats, they walked past William, Kate, George, and Charlotte, and as is tradition and custom, they all bowed to the King and Queen. However, Charlotte, after she curtsied to King Charles, she lost her footing slightly and stumbled a bit. She then looked to see whether her parents had noticed it, and in doing so, she missed her opportunity to curtsy to Camilla. She looked a little bit mortified. However, Camilla immediately turned to her, put a reassuring hand on her shoulder, and made her very much aware that everything was okay. And I think that that was just a really touching moment because it shows you that behind all of the pomp and ceremony, behind the traditions like curtsying and bowing, they are still first and foremost a family, and this was a grandmother having a very wonderful interaction with one of her grandchildren. Now, in addition to that, we also had Lionel Richie's performance, which was a little bit controversial. Some people criticized the American Idol judge, saying that he was disappointing, that his voice didn't sound as good as they had hoped it might. I personally thought he did a great job, and I think that it really helped to liven up the whole festivity. And it also gave us a wonderful moment where we got to see the royal family dancing to Lionel Richie. And that is something that I don't think anyone can afford to miss. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you check it out.
And now, of course, Louis was not at the concert, but George and Charlotte had the time of their lives. What can you tell us about that?
So George and Charlotte are obviously much older than their youngest brother, Louis. It was past Louis's bedtime. You know, the coronation concert took place later in the evening. It wasn't like the coronation ceremony, which was a daytime event. The coronation concert was later on, and William and Kate, yes, they want their children to be part of these historic moments, but they also want their children to know that there are rules that they need to follow. And the fact of the matter is, it was past Louis's bedtime, so he didn't get to attend. I have no idea whether or not he was disappointed by that, or whether he was kind of like Lionel Richie, who. But Charlotte and George did get to be there. They are a bit older, and they looked as though they were having a wonderful time. They were seated alongside their parents. They were chatting to one another. They were grinning. They were clapping. It was just a wonderful opportunity for the two of them to do something a bit more grown up. And as they get older, I think we can expect to see that more and more, which for fans of the young royals, who isn't, is a very exciting opportunity.
And how did those two kids enjoy Katy Perry and Lionel Richie?
They had a whale of a time. You know, they might not necessarily be too familiar with Lionel Richie. I think his music might be a little bit too out of touch for them. But Katy Perry was wonderful. The two of them looked like they were having an absolute blast. And to be honest, I was at home having a blast along with them.